Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at how to work with our limiters in programming within our Motec M1 software. Now, our limiters are going to be such things as our engine rev limiter or an overheating protection limiter or an oil temp type of rev limiter. We're going to have a lot of options for programming in our GPR and GPRP packages from Motec. Now, if you have a different firmware package, your limiter strategy might be different what I'm showing in this training module, but the concepts we're going to be talking about here are going to be the same across all other firmware packages. Let's take a look here at where we can program our limiters in our Motec. We're going to move from our tuning window right here down into our setup. This is going to be found under my workbooks, which is the M1 Training Course workbook I provided for our training course. If we go here under setup and we move across here, we're going to find a window called limiters. This is going to be all of the available limiters we have to program within the Motec in terms of limiting our engine based on variables. Now, we do have other limiters that could come into play: launch control, gear shift ignition, or gear shift cut, I should say, not always ignition, but launch control, rolling anti-lag. So there's other type of limiters that can be put in place, but these are going to be more of the general type of limiters that are based on a specific condition, such as our coolant temp or oil temp. Let's jump in here and talk about how this actually works. It's actually really straightforward and simple, and this page will definitely allow you to access things easy as possible so you see exactly what's going on and you know how the limiters are going to be programmed in your file. So looking in here, we're going to find that we have this coolant temp engine speed limit, we have an engine load average engine speed limit maximum, and then engine oil temp engine speed limit. So we have 4 options in this firmware package to program for a limiter to rev limit the engine. Either we do fuel or ignition cut. We'll talk about how to implement either a fuel and ignition cut here in just a little bit. The key takeaway here is that the Motec is going to always use the lowest command limiter that's in play. So even if we place, let's just say, our coolant temperature here at something like 8,500 RPM, that's the maximum, let's say, we want to rev our engine to, we could initiate a different limiter based on a fail-safe strategy here, so that might start to rev limit the engine sooner. Or we may find that something like a gear shift with a gear shift cut calls into play a limiter, and that can override what we command in here. The Motec is always looking for the lowest limiter that's commanded, and that will override all the other limiters. So to demonstrate this real quick, let me just go ahead and just set this to 9,000 RPM. What we need to pay attention to when we're going in and programming this is what the engine speed limit state is showing. We can find that here in our channels list. We can actually see here, looking at the states, and it'll call out and tell us what's going on here. So engine speed limit state is showing engine load average, and that's going to be calling out where the limiter is coming from at this point in time. Now, we're not at that engine speed for any limiter to actually be applied. We can see engine speed is going to be only here at 2,300 RPM. So we're way below the limiter. But if a limiter comes into play, that'll be the first one or the lowest one that's called out and the first one that's initiated to limit the engine at the speed called out in that particular table. Now, looking at this, we also see here, we can see the ignition cut state and fuel cut state. These will show us if we have an ignition or a fuel cut or both in play when the limiter is called on. Now, we can program what type of limiter we want, whether it's ignition cut or a fuel cut, under our parameter list right here. We're going to find under our engine speed limit default, ignition range, and fuel margin. And the way that most Motec base files are set up, it'll always be ignition cut and not a fuel cut. Now, how this works is it looks at the value that we place in either of the tables that we're wanting our limiter to be implemented. So let's just say it's going to be coolant temperature. If I want to have my maximum engine speed at 8,500, so that's the highest I want to allow my engine to rev to, and I want my spark cut limiter in play, it'll take a look here at the ignition range, and this is called out here as 200 RPM. So what this is going to do at 8,300 RPM, it's going to start at a 0% ignition cut. If it gets to 8,500 RPM, it'll go all the way to 100% ignition cut and completely cutting off combustion. If it's at 8,400, we'll be at 50% ignition cut. So it's going to act as a percentage of cut in a progressive manner. So looking at this, we need to consider what the ignition range is going to be, and then also our maximum allowed engine speed before we get to the 100% cut. 200 to 300 RPM is pretty typical for an ignition range. So
thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here. And you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.